and the video and the sound was off, and it was like, oh no, that can happen. Wah. And it was PBS.
Speaking of which, Shayna, if you're going live, should we all hit mute?
Well, it's still 5 to 6, right? So when do we actually start?
Not now.
It looks like we're already live, but Shayna, can you turn on your mic to talk to us?
Sorry, gosh, okay. Yeah, we are live now. So maybe if we just stay quiet for about 4 minutes. Or we can keep talking, I don't know.
Is it necessary for us to do that? Like, does it work better if we're quiet?
Well, people are watching us right now.
I think it's better if we are quiet, if we are not talking. So we should mute ourselves unless we have something to say because of background noise and such.
Great.
So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself because we're live. Anybody want to smoke? Kyle, vaping is bad for you.
Don't vape. Are you crazy?
But by all means, give unsolicited advice.
Hey, I'm the father of a teenager. I had to like bring the hammer down and be like, you cannot do this when the whole scare was happening with the kids dying of vaping.
Yeah.
It was, I had to be that stern father.
Calvin was around shows. So when was it? American Falls was not catastrophic, right? And boy, he saw those e-cigarettes. He was 8, 12. And boy, he was like,
Played his dad.
I want those. Yeah, those are cool. The e-cigs, those are cool. When I'm 17, can I have one? He's now 17 and has not requested one again, to my knowledge. Hi, Kyle.
I think you guys are closer to the ages now that are more appropriate for the script.
Oh no! Don't
So
you dare.
it's time for a proper Rima, age appropriate Rima.
I'm game.
We'll do it when we're able to, when we're all 65.
Yeah.
You can go in the theater again.
Yeah.
We'll do it behind plexiglass in little plexiglass boxes.
There was a very optimistic article on vaccines today on the front page of the New York Times. So here's hoping.
So we're at 6 now. Rob, do you want to maybe do a little?
What we did last time that worked really well is, do you want to tell our audience just about how to use the chat and just how to, like all of the technical things, and then I'll sort of do a blanket intro?
Sure, that's great. Okay, so since it's 6 o'clock, we'll go ahead and start, everybody. Thank you so much. We have 14 people watching now, so that's exciting. Welcome to our live Q&A with the artists, director, playwright, and Cleveland Public Theater director. So we're so happy to have you with us. And just some very quick housekeeping. Really, the only thing to know is we will be taking your questions in the chat to the right of the screen. So please, oh, I'm saying, is there a way to make you louder? There is not. I think that's as loud as I am. Oh, so, yeah, please go ahead and send us your questions through the chat, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can in this hour. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. Thank you, Shayna. So to those listening in, this always works best if you have questions, and the way to ask the questions is simply to type them in the chat on the YouTube page, and that's how we'll know that you have a question, and I will monitor that, and as we're able, I'll simply then ask those questions to the creative team here. We have the full creative team from the Catastrophic Theater's production of There's a Happiness That Morning Is. We've got Mikkel Marr, the playwright, Jason Nodlet, the director, and the full cast. And hopefully some of you had a chance to watch the video recording of it. It was something that I had a chance to do earlier, and was a wonderful sort of revisiting of a favorite script. So let's just have a conversation, and we'll start with maybe Jason and Mikkel talking a little bit about the play itself, how the play became something, Jason, that you were interested in. Mikkel, I know sometimes the origins of a play are not, sometimes they're lost to the mists of time, but maybe, there's something to be said about the writing of it. So I'll turn it over to the two of you to talk a little bit about, prior to the production, some of the discussion that happened.
Sure. As far as the origins, it was just I live in Evanston near Chicago, so I'm a Chicago-based playwright. I have my own theater company up here. And prior to Happiness, I had written a play that Jason also directed called The Strangerer, which was a play about George W. Bush and John Kerry and Jim Lehrer, the sadly departed Jim Lehrer. And it was a very unsexy play. It was just these three very stiff guys. Actually, Troy was in that play as well. And after writing that play, I had a real desire to write something that was more human and had more sex in it. And I didn't realize that it was going to literally have such a forward sexual theme, but it turned out that it did. So that's what I wrote. That's sort of what the background that it came out of, if you just want to talk about a playwright's sort of originating impulse, that was mine. But other than that, it was just an interest in the lecture format as a theater vehicle. Interested me, and love interested me, and sex in public interested me. So that's where it took off from. The Blake came later.
And we'll certainly have questions, I'm sure, about the Blake and the poetry. University lecturers, though, that's certainly my universe. I wonder what was interesting to you about that.
I have found university lectures incredibly inspiring in my life. I mean, I think they're a form of theater that hits people at their most impressionable, I think. With the greatest amount of rhetorical content. It really puts the lie to the idea that you need a story, or you need characters, or you need arc, or any of this other sort of Aristotelian stuff, that you can actually do a play like The Fever, or something like Wallace Shawn. You can actually do a sermon or a lecture, and to me it can be incredibly moving. If you've ever had that experience as a undergraduate, or think back to those days, if you've had a really great professor who spoke to you on any subject, they can be incredible performers and can spin a live performance in front of your eyes that will change you for the rest of your life. So I always believed, I don't think this play was meant as a parody of the lecture format. I thought it was, I'm trying my best to be that, really the kind of to have both characters be those kind of lecturers that could really, that students would really love, that students would, if they were at all inclined to like poetry or to like Blake, that they would really latch onto. So that was my hope, that the play could carry a lot of its energy through the just the pure joy and beauty and power of the lecture. Just somebody talking about something that they either know something about or believe they know something about. So yeah.
Thank you. That was really a wonderful answer. Jason, can you talk a little bit about how this play struck you and why you wanted to, put the play on, but also maybe you could also tell us a little bit about why you cast who you cast, since they're joining us as well.
Well, I learned about Mikkel's plays from a wonderful visiting director called Alex Harvey, and he told me to read The Stranger and gave me the book, and it included The Stranger and Spirits to Enforce. So I read them back to back and decided that we'll produce both of them in repertory, which we almost did, but for a terrible storm. And after working on those plays, after reading those plays, we really just felt like we wanted to do everything that Mikkel wrote. And of course, the way that it struck me when I read it was that it was hilarious and incredibly moving, which I think was the response that most people have had. As to why I cast who I cast, they're my favorite actors and they were amazing. And I don't remember even considering anyone else for these roles. Maybe I did, but I don't remember doing that.
That's great. Thank you. We do have a question in the chat. This comes from a friend of Catastrophic Theater, Elizabeth Keel, who asks, and this is for everyone, maybe we can start with Mikkel, but it's addressed generally to the group, to talk about what everyone's relationship with poetry was prior to the show. I assume this means, did you read poetry? Did you ever take a stab at writing poetry? Maybe Blake in particular, maybe not. So Mikkel, if you want to go first.
Sure, yes, I wrote poetry before this, especially as an undergraduate. That was my first sort of entree into adult creative writing. I took a poetry class at the University of Michigan. So that was my first endeavor, was writing poetry. And I never considered being a full-time poet or anything, but I did well. I wrote poetry that did well. I won an award and so forth. And at the University of Michigan, the Hopwood Awards, is an award there, and so it was very encouraging to me. So poetry was always important to me from the beginning. And then I got into theater, but it always remained as something that I felt was integral to the whole theater and playwriting project. That you have to grapple with the idea that when we're writing plays, that we are writing language that is on some level musical, or is extra in some way, right? So that there's an expectation, even with audiences of today coming to the theater and hearing so-called realistic dialogue or naturalistic dialogue, that even in an Annie Baker play, she takes incredible care with the sound and the rhythm and the meter of her very, very real sounding dialogue. And there's a pleasure to the sound of it. There's a pleasure to the music of it. So I think every playwright has a relationship on some level, whether it's conscious or not, to this idea of music as language, of people pushing around the air with their lungs and their tongues in a room with other people. Yes, the short answer is yes, I had a relationship to poetry. And actually, not just, I'm going to drop a big name here. When I was at the Bennington College, I went back to finish my undergraduate degree in the 90s at Bennington, which is this small college in Vermont. And this is sort of loosely based on that campus. So all the references to the beauty of the campus. The Bennington College is not run down like the college that the play takes place in, but the gorgeous landscape is very much everything I steal from Bennington. When I was there, the poet Mary Oliver, if you know her, she was a guest teacher, and she was teaching a course on Whitman, just on Song of Myself, and nobody signed up for it except me. So for an entire term, it was just me sitting next to Mary Oliver at her desk in her guest artist office, going over Walt Whitman. And that had a huge impact on me. So as you can well imagine, if you know her at all.
So one more quick question, Mikkel, before we hear from some other folks. You had mentioned that the Blake element came into the script a little later. Is that a favorite poet of yours? Why would you want to spend? Yeah.
Well, I think Songs of Innocence and Experience definitely, and his persona largely, and his artwork as well, his engravings, his etchings, enormously important to me. I find the later stuff difficult, but intriguingly so. I think there's only like 5 people in the world who claim to actually understand some of his later poetry. But Blake, yeah, is enormously important to me. I don't know why I didn't think of him right away, because he's kind of that hippie, right? He's the kind of free love, kind of like openness and break the boundaries and be revolutionary, and that's what I was writing about, like this that was sort of the ideas behind the whole setup for There Is a Happiness, is this these 2 people that sort of break the rules and have sex in public. But I didn't. They were lecturing on other things. I had them lecturing on mummification and Macbeth and other things, and nothing was really working. And then it was just one of those aha moments that is like, of course it's they should be talking about Blake.
That's great. And in the chat, you've got some Mary Oliver fans who are very impressed of the semester you spent. Jason, relationship to poetry.
This is embarrassing. Do song lyrics count?
Mm-hmm.
I read the poems that I was required to read in high school and college. I wrote poems in high school as an acting major at our arts high school here. I wrote poems in college. I wrote poetry slam poems after college. I love musical language. I guess that's part of why I love Mikkel and his writing. Yeah, that's it. I don't have much of a relationship with the great poets.
Anyone from the cast, you just can, I won't put anybody on the spot, but if you have something to say about the subject, you just wave your hand and unmute yourself.
I wanted to say, Robert, I kind of hated poetry until graduate school. A friend, when someone kind of personally showed me, as Mikkel was talking about with that extraordinary relationship with Mary Oliver, then I started to kind of wake up to it. How, oh, well, that's really cool. And then reading this play the first time, I just, when I got to the line, we read poems, so to live as poems, to build from thought and song a home, it took my breath away. I was like, I wrote an expletive in the margins of just, wow. It took my breath away, and I really, really love words. So since then.
I've always liked poetry as a kid growing up. I went through a phase in college of the French Romantic poets like Rimbaud and Baudelaire. And then I kind of rediscovered poetry when I read the poems of David Berman, who we did produced and directed a piece called Actual Air, which was based on his book of poems. Sadly, he departed us last year, but I was a huge fan of his work and his music, so that was probably my most recent, poet that I really liked.
Jason had asked earlier, do song lyrics count? And people don't know that Jason is one of the biggest fans of Bob Dylan, who of course just won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago. David Berman was both a lyricist, songwriter, and a poet as well. I think there's I think for people who say that they don't read poetry or not, I think we've grown up in the golden age of song lyrics, or one of the golden ages of song lyrics. We've just been inundated with it since we were kids. So I believe in lyrics as poetry. We just don't sort of recognize it as such, but they are.
And of course, in Shakespeare, there's no real difference in the text when they shift into singing like the rain, it raineth every day or whatever. It's just part of the poetry of the play. Yeah. We've got some more questions coming up in the chat. There's the question that the play was produced twice by Catastrophic. Both has the same cast, but apparently the venue was different. And the question here is, did the venue change affect the approach? And what was it like being able to revisit the play? So both the restaging question and also the question about the difference in venue. And whoever wants to field that, just go right ahead.
Well, I want to say that I just loved, we've had a wonderful opportunity to do plays a second time, and thank God, because there are many times on closing night where you go, oh, that's what I was saying. And so it's wonderful to get to do it again. The spaces were quite different. One really, really intimate room, and another more of a vaster stage, but still small. It was just the chance to get to do it again. That was my favorite part, because it was just fun to dive in a little more. That's the kind of thing that I need. Like, go, it's okay, go a little farther, coax yourself in. So that was what was great for me.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. Revisiting something is, I always like to jump at the chance to do that, because you finish it and then you live with something for what is a couple of years, I guess, between these two. And it works on you, and you just from sheer experience, it means something different when you read it again. So, you learn it easier, it comes to you easier. So you don't think about it as much on stage. It's just been living in you. And so that's what I felt. And I really like to revisit stuff whenever possible.
Okay.
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Please.
I feel like when we remount a play, it's partly because we love the play, of course, and partly because it did well. It's also, I think, because we don't nail things down when we rehearse a play. It's a living thing. It changes every night, and living with it over the course of a run leaves you wanting to come at it again. And as I recall, and I talked to Tamara earlier today, and I said, my only answer today is going to be, I can't remember. It's been too long. I can't remember. As I recall, we played around with the verse differently. We played around with a lot of things differently. But I also, before we left this question, please, I don't mean to put you on the spot, and you don't have to, Kyle. But I don't think Kyle really likes going back to plays for various reasons. And so I wanted to just ask if you had an answer about it, Kyle. And if you don't, that's totally fine too. Unmute yourself. Kyle, unmute yourself. We still can't hear you, man. You might have to phone in. Maybe Shayna can text you with instructions about that.
Type it in the chat. Just kidding.
Do you know ASL? Thank you.
Moving on.
That's a great answer. Okay.
We'll dip back into the chat for another question, and that is for everyone. Do you have favorite lines, or because it's in rhymed couplets, you have favorite rhymes from the play? And that's for everybody, and I figure that includes Mikkel too, if you want to add that. Anybody have favorites from the dialogue?
So many. I'm going to chime in because it's the one that keeps kind of going in my head as I've been listening again. And I think it was a change from the first version to the second, because the change is noted on my script. Maybe it was a change that happened in the first version, but Bernard says it's at the beginning. He says the birds would pick seeds out of their feathers and sip the dew blown from those mountains, whether I cry or dance or die. Be assured, the morning will not be disturbed, right?
At least, yeah.
Not be disturbed. That's awesome.
I have one, and I can't remember the exact line. I don't have the script in front of me, but there's a rhyme with the word mirror that I thought was really great, and I can't remember. It's something about it rings me like a.
It's weird.
Yeah, rhymes with
Weird.
weird.
I ran weird with mirrored. Yeah.
Yes, weird with mirrored. Yeah.
Hello?
I love that. Yeah.
Hey, there's Kyle.
I hear
You
you,
can hear
Kyle.
me?
There he
Yeah.
is.
What did you do?
Ah, that's great.
Kyle, do you want to talk about remounts?
Yeah, I just want to jump back and say one thing that I remember being very excited about this remount until we got to rehearsal, and then I found out you really wanted us to work. I thought it was just going to be, let's put the show back together again. And then you were like, no, let's get out the scripts and do our thing. I was really bummed about that, but I'm glad we did, because I do feel like my second time was the better time. So I'm glad we did that.
I am too.
I want to say something. There's a million cool rhymes. I was trying to find one of the shared rhyme moments, like when we really start arguing in the end, when Ellen and Bernard are like going at it. The shared lines are really, really fun. But I was thinking about the whole thing of lecture, and I am a middle school teacher, and I hate lecturing. It's just hard. And but listening to you talk tonight, Mikkel, reminded me that in college, I did love it. I loved being in a lecture when somebody enjoyed it a great deal and launched, and I would absolutely go with them. I remember, and this is the first time that I ever came in contact with the concept of being invisible too, which is such a cool part of this play. Like I felt kind of invisible in a lecture until this one professor, and then all of a sudden I knew that I wasn't invisible. And it was because of the way that person just launched and let go so completely, and I was ready to travel that road with them. So that was a real cool reminder about the format of this play.
Cool, thanks. We also, I'm going to go to the next question from the chat. This is from Marianthi, and I should note that we have Beth Wood joining us, who was introduced to us by Mikkel and has directed the play, not for the Catastrophic Theater, but the question is, has Beth watched the Catastrophic Theater version? If so, were there remarkable differences in the staging or direction? Then asked if the Cleveland version is accessible by video somewhere. So Beth, thank you for joining us, and I'll let you go with those questions.
Awesome, thanks, Robert. Yes, I did watch. I actually had a watch party with the Cleveland cast and production team last week. It was really beautiful because we did the show in 2013, I think in like February 2013, and we might have opened just like 2 weeks before or after you guys, your very first version. And so it was an incredible joy to reconnect with that team and get to see your version together. I think really the biggest difference also speaks to a massive lesson I learned as a young director. I took the play in a very theatrical way, scenically, and that was really the biggest difference. And then I learned that I actually should have consulted my playwright before taking that massive choice. So we went in this very theatrical, scenic way of a sloped stage that was actually a chalkboard. So they wrote not only on a chalkboard, but then they also wrote on a floor. And then we surrounded the audience in William Blake's poetry. And so kind of riffed off of Blake's artwork and really kind of created this environment where this was a really rundown school, that nature was kind of encroaching into the lecture hall. So for example,
it was beautiful. I mean, from what
I
I saw.
have pictures. If you guys want to see pictures, I could share my screen. But like the lectern was a tree stump with a lectern on top of it. So really the biggest overarching difference was I only had one lectern. And we kind of played in this way of Ellen and Bernard being in the same area, but kind of crossing into each other's spaces. So they were divided in half. And so it was staged in this way of purposefully crossing into songs of innocence or songs of experience as a representation of where they were at in that moment. At least that's what I attempted to do. I don't know if I was really successful, but that was really the biggest difference, I think. And unfortunately, the Cleveland version is not available anywhere.
Really? I feel
No.
like I saw a version. I feel, because I didn't see it in Cleveland, but I feel like
I sent you a version,
right.
but that was only for you and me.
Okay. So it was very different scenically. But what I was telling Jason, I said, yeah, so Beth directed it and she did this different thing with the set. But as far as I could tell from my viewing and a meeting of the cast and watching them was that your direction of the actors and their impulses were very similar to the very successful cast in Houston. And it seemed to me that the play, it didn't matter one way or the other what the set was. It just felt like the people, from what I could tell, from what
Well,
how
I think
people
there's
responded to it, and how the actors. It's always most important to me is how the actors actually respond to a work that I've written. Is that if I get the most gratification out of when actors really say, "I really love working on that," and that I felt that from that same vibe from the Cleveland folks. So
for sure. Like, and there's so much heart in this play. I think I was messaging Mikkel last week as we were having our watch party, and it was just so wonderful to revisit the play after all this time and remember how genius this play is with the rhythm and the rhyme and the heart and the humor. You know, it's like heartbreaking when Ellen talks about her tumor and the potato. Like, that breaks my heart. But then it just pushes these boundaries of humor and like gets utterly ridiculous, and then like kind of then grounds out. So really the heart of the play just rings through no matter what you do, as long as you have the right people, you know, the right company of humans willing to share themselves. It was just delightful to work on. I'm so grateful.
Well, thank you very much, Beth. It's always cool to get a sense of how plays are done differently, you know, at different theaters, you know, by different artistic teams. The next question in the chat, Kyle, it's specifically for you, and I think somebody wants to hear more about your preference for the second time performing the play. The question is specifically, why do you think your second time doing the play was better?
Well, I don't know if I've actually ever thought about it, but I guess because it seemed like, at least for my participation in it, that there was an effort to be or root itself more in realistic motivations rather than just allowing this strange little thing that's happening. Like, I don't know. For me, it became more real why this professor would do, or Dean would do what he was doing somehow. And also more of an effort to find more joy in his participation in this and trying to solve the problem that's happening and revealing his backstory to the participants. I just felt like it was more joy to him in doing that. Whereas before there was a lot more anger, and joy is always better to feel than anger. So, and also I think that I was paying attention more to speed than I did the first time. And so I love playing with the speed, and I don't know, those are just the thoughts that come off the top of my head.
Okay, well, great, thank you. That all makes a whole lot of sense. The next question from the chat, and again, thank you to everybody who's putting questions in the chat. Mikkel, the next question is for you. It is, was there a reason why you chose to give Bernard innocence and Ellen experience?
Yeah, because Ellen is dying, and she's more experienced. She's older than Bernard, and she's smarter, and she's dying. So that's the main reason. And she, you know, so she's the sick Rose, and so, yeah.
Okay.
If that doesn't answer the question, please.
Yeah, that
I mean,
answers the
this seems
question.
a whole, yeah. I mean, yeah.
It seems stunning to me, Mikkel, that you didn't know you were working with those poems until you were inside the play.
Yeah, I got lucky actually, because so there was two things that I remember happening. This is, and memory is always suspect in these creation myths of around plays. But I remember first saying, "Oh, it should be Blake," because Blake is about release and to some degree sex and passion and all that. So I was using innocence and experience. And then I thought, so they have to lecture on these poems, and I should just pick the shortest poems because I can't have them reading out a whole long poem because that'll take too much time and it'd be too much, and the, you know, thinking about the patience of the audience. So I just went to two of the shortest poems, and they turned out to be the exact as time would tell would be the best poems I could have picked, just based on the themes that I was working with and the situation of the characters. So yeah.
You know, it's come up a couple of times in our talk today, just how sexy the play is. And if you, you know, if anybody saw the image used to announce today's talk, you know, it's yeah, I can see Amy is reacting to it now. Amy, do you have anything to say about that? Because it's you know, it's Amy and Troy tied up in a knot on the floor together.
Yeah, I didn't, I know I'd seen that picture before, but then when I saw it, I was, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. I just, I'm glad for it, like, because, you know, the next moment is, you know, what happened last night. And I'm so grateful we were comfortable enough to get kind of close to it. I remember the conversation with Jason going, okay, so how comfortable is everybody? Where can we get to before the lights go out? Because that the doom of the college is seconds away.
I mean, that's the payoff, right? Too. I mean, everybody's been imagining what it looked like, you know, what they looked like having sex in public, you know, so that's the reward, I guess. You know?
This is also one of the advantages of working with a company over a long period of time. Troy and Amy have been paired in so many plays together. I think there was maybe an increased level of comfort there. I don't want to jump off of this question if there's more to say about it, but I'll have a quick question for Beth, if I could ask it maybe later or now, whatever.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I already know the Theodore Oobleck answer to this question. But did you all use Night Blooming Jasmine?
Oh, wow. You're making me exercise my memory. I want to say I found fake Night Blooming Jasmine online. And we actually used like sprigs of it. So like a wax or a silk version. I think I did.
I know that Mikkel's company did not, which was sort of hilarious to us when we learned it, because
we don't live in Texas, man.
well, but now we also could have called the playwright, you know, ahead of making this decision. We didn't, and we sort of tend towards reverence in our productions. So when we worked on the first one, which was actually in 2011 and our remount was in 2013, we went to such extreme trouble to maintain the Night Blooming Jasmine because it truly does only bloom at night. That's the only time that you get a strong odor from it. And we were in such a small space, it got passed around to everyone. Everyone in the audience smelled it. Yeah. And it blew my mind that we could have not done that because it was such extraordinary trouble to do it.
But I thought you said that it was like growing in some alley somewhere. Like someone found it, like there was just
Greg Cody.
There was
like you found like a huge amount of it somewhere. Like we were doing our production probably in the you know, it's cold in Chicago all large part of the year. I just don't think it was an option. It just wasn't a thing that we could do. So we used real plants and something that looked like jasmine or, you know, something, but yeah, we did. I'm jealous that you actually, I've actually never seen or smelled Night Blooming Jasmine to my knowledge. Never have.
I
sure
never even knew about it.
What?
I never knew about it until the play, and then Greg Cody found it.
Yeah,
and so I knew, you know, knew what it smelled like, and it's not like, you know, Carolina jasmine, which is all over here too.
So Greg Cody would, I think, confirm that he found it, but that every night before the performance, there was this incredibly nervous to-do about whether or not it was going to be ready, whether or not it was blooming in time for the actual curtain. mean, we didn't have a.
Yeah, I see Catherine Catmull in the YouTube comment. She played Ellen in the Capital T production down in Austin. She just says, even in Texas, it was the wrong time of year for our production to use real jasmine. So.
Yeah,
I remember driving
I want to
around
say that
to try to find it.
I want to say that we like sprayed our fake jasmine,
Yeah.
you know, night blooming jasmine down with like an aromatic something. But I really don't remember that much. I know it wasn't real, so that would have been impossible.
Okay, another related question from the chat, and this is about the Capital T production. Mickle, you saw our Austin production, and wasn't there one in DC as well? And of course, the Oobleck production. And adds love this play, one of my favorite experiences in the theater. But Mickle, you've probably seen this play done a number of different times, and maybe you could talk about differences and similarities in some of the versions you've seen.
Actually, because I didn't see, so it has been done many different cities, many different places around the country. It's one of my most oft-produced plays. But I've really only seen the two Texas productions and our own production here, unless there's somebody I'm regretfully forgetting in this moment, in which if I am, please forgive me. So the differences between those are not, and I'm going to count Beth's production because I saw the video and I met the actors, so I feel like I have a closer association with that production that I didn't see than others that I haven't seen. I think what is remarkable about this play in particular, of the plays that I've written that gets done, is that it really, despite Beth's different set, that I was trying to express this, that it really feels like it draws a certain kind of director and a certain kind of company and a certain kind of cast, especially in the role of Ellen. Ellen just seems to attract a particular sort of, a woman past 40 usually, and is usually this extremely well respected and kind of a force of nature in the theater community that she's in, for whatever reason. It always feels like it's like somebody who everybody thinks is, oh, that's the funniest and that's the best actor in town, right? So that's something that feels like a underlying, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but I'm not sure how to say that. It just feels like that the people that are drawn to this as actors or cast in this play as actors always seem to me to be the sort of like Kyle is, and Troy and Amy here, and Catherine in Austin, Matthew Wright in Cleveland, and I could go on. They really seem like these help me out here, you guys. Like, how would you just like they seem like staples within the theater community. They feel like they're the guiding lights in the theater community. That they feel like they're the ones that have been around and just really people look to. That's what I would say. That's my, perhaps, I don't know, maybe it's a misguided perception, but that's what my feeling is every time this play gets done, is like, oh, those are the people in the theater community that really rock and have some.
I think the word is badass. I mean,
I'm
not saying actors.
Well, there's plenty of badass actors. There's something else
the writing. The writing is so like, you have to handle, there's like crepusculate, there's like crazy words you got to be willing to learn and understand, and then just use, like you use them every day, and then also like insult people you love dearly with the flick of your hand, but then also dive down to like, and this is the end. It's like the role. I remember Greg Dean talking about the role. He was like, it's like, it's funny and it's smart and it's real and yeah, so it's a dream. This is a dream role. Mikkel, do you rhyme often? Because that was the other thing. I loved this play. Do you rhyme in other plays?
Yeah.
You did? Okay.
I had, yes. So I had written a translation of Cyrano de Bergerac, which was in rhyme earlier. So that's one of the first things that I did. That was in the early aughts. And then when this play, I'd written this play in prose, and it didn't really work. We had a reading of it at the Goodman Theater, and the actors were great, the direction was great, and it just was flat as a pancake. And I sort of went home and lay on the bed and realized I had to somehow completely rewrite it in some way, but I couldn't figure out how, and then just picked up the pen and started rewriting everything in rhyme. And since then I've written other plays in rhyme. So I'm a fan of rhyme. I think it should be. So a lot of my favorite plays, contemporary plays, are in rhyme. There's not too many of them, but The Strange Undoing of Prudencia Hart. This is a great play that Catastrophic should do if you've never seen it or read it. It's a beautiful play in rhyme and all about Scottish ballads.
Another question from the chat, and this returns us to the earlier question about innocence versus experience. And the question is, I guess you might have made Bernard be the one who gets sick. Was there some kind of significance in the gender of innocence versus experience?
No.
There you have it, folks. So right now,
that sounds so rude. There wasn't. It was just, it made sense to me that Ellen, she's the one who's speaking on experience because she's more experienced, and she's speaking on the sick Rose. And then, yeah, it just made sense to me that she's ill.
Mikkel, there was one other story that you told us, I think, when you came down to see the show, and maybe we did a talk back afterwards. About being stuck on this play and having added a third character, because I think originally it was only Ellen and Bernard. Is that true?
It was
story worth telling.
Yeah, I think that's probably, this is now we may be into an invented memory. But yeah, it was just mostly just them, and they're referencing Dean, and I'm sort of trying to figure out how to wrap the play up. And I remember that I'm writing and I'm under deadline. It was for the first reading. I had to get a draft done. And I remember it was one of those glorious moments as a playwright you have where you're under deadline and you're just got to get some sort of ending. And it just came in a rush. Like Dean jumped out of the audience and he jumped on stage, and his entire backstory, everything happened in, like, it feels like 15 minutes, like that entire last section of the play where Dean enters, it came in an entire rush. Everything was just like, that makes perfect sense. He's invisible. He's been here the whole time. He's in love with them both. He loves, so it was, that all came at once in my memory, which is, I'm probably making that up, but it was exhausting. I remember it felt like I'd been through the ringer after that.
I'm probably remembering this wrong, but my recollection is that when you were stuck, your wife, Jean, bought you a book on playwriting.
She had bought me, as a joke, when she had bought me this old, like how to write plays from like the 60s. She bought it at a garage sale or something. And it was just a joke gift. And I was just flipping through it. And I remember this one nostrum, this one little like tip is that it's very difficult to write a two-person play, and you actually need a third character to wrap things up. And I chuckled at that and thought, oh, that's just a silly, just a made up rule. And I remember that rule when I was stuck with this play. And I'd already read that rule from that book, a year previous. And it's not a true rule. It's ridiculous, but it worked for this play. It's like, oh, it actually does. This guy that they've been talking about the entire time really should make an entrance, and yeah. So I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe less the rule from the book and more the fact that they talk about him a lot
Yeah.
before he shows up.
I mean, most plays do have a ghost in them. That's somebody that is influencing the action and influencing the characters that never shows up, and is enormously important. So I thought he was my ghost. He was that he was just this influence that just would never show. And then I was like, oh, there's no reason why, not only that he can't show, but that he can't have been there the entire time. And that was fun to invent ridiculous reasons why he was there.
When I was listening to it again today, I was thinking about, it's interesting too, because it seems like Dean is trying to solve the problem too. Like, look, there's a problem here, and the answer is you all have to apologize.
Yeah.
And there is a big problem, but it's like, that never seems like, like, no, Dean, that's not the answer. But so it's funny that he's trying to solve the problem too, but in no way is he being effective.
That's called conflict, Amy. It's what happens between characters.
I
I'll
think
get the
Dean's
book.
position
Give
is
me the book.
completely reasonable. I think you do not have sex in public. I think that is actually, I agree with that. I think that's actually, he's, I'm pro Dean's point of view on that, actually.
There's a note in the chat that in Austin, they did not list Dean in the program so that it was an extra surprise. Is that something that you favor, Michael?
That's fine. The way we solved it in our production, we listed him as his first name, James, which it's something that Ellen blurts out right when he's having a heart attack or whatever he's doing, when he almost dies. And so you just barely get that his first name is James. So we just had in the program, Alan Bernard James. And so people would be hearing about Dean, then, and maybe if they'd seen their program, it would still be a surprise to them. The way
Wait, is his name then James Dean?
James Dean, yeah.
Dean.
Sexy, right?
It's very sexy.
part.
Yeah. Well, we're in our last few minutes. I don't see any new questions in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that. But is there anything else that the folks on the creative team want to talk about for 5 more minutes? Anything that's lingering around you want to say a little more of from what we've discussed so far?
Here's a great rhyme. There with his victim partner face to face, this makes in movies for sweet comedy. In life, it's like uninvited sodomy. I loved that when I was really mad at Bernard.
I will just say that one of my best memories of doing this play, and I think it was in the first version and our second time, is the incorporation of basketball terminology into our staging, where we talked about the 3-second rule. And this basketball conversation eventually led to a collaboration on basketball. So it's kind of interesting.
Wasn't that like the space between the lecterns was like the lane? And you couldn't be in the lane wasn't that it?
Get out of the paint.
Yeah.
Yes, that was it. Yeah, that was the paint.
Right.
Awesome.
I think that was it. And yeah, as Kyle said, that led to several years later us commissioning Mikkel to write a musical about basketball. So cool. And that one had a lot of rhyming in it, if you count song lyrics. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't even recall, was the Pine in verse?
Yeah, the Pine was all in verse and much longer. So yeah.
And how many productions have you seen of that one?
Just yours. That's it. You're the only company that's been brave enough to do that show.
Everyone should do it. It's a beautiful play.
I just sent it to Elizabeth Keel, who is, I think she's in the chat, a company in Chicago that I don't know that she does, because they did a production of hers and they specialize in genre fantasy and science fiction. I just sent it to them. So she should ping them and say, you should actually give a second look to this overblown play by Mikkel. If she's still listening.
Yeah, I just want to say it was so cool. I mean, this has always been a play that I've has great memory for me, and
We are. Oh, go ahead, Annie.
well, just seeing it again got me. It gave me chills again. It was
Yeah.
remembering it by seeing was cool, and I got to see things that I didn't get to see because I was turned away or something like that. It was really great to see this play.
Yeah, this was one of those ones that I just looked forward to doing every night, and just could have kept going and going. I mean, it was just a real thrill every night to go on there and do it.
Well, and I think we were all glad to be able to have the opportunity to rewatch it. It's been a real gift to the Houston Theater and Theater Beyond to have a chance to revisit some of these videos of catastrophic theater productions. They're just
Froze up.
Rob froze up.
Rob. You know, one
Rob?
other part that was really intimidating was talking to the audience for the first version.
questions
The
or
idea
requests for us.
of talking to the audience was super scary,
Yeah, in that really small room.
but very invigorating once once we got used to it. Sorry, Rob.
Oh,
You froze
yeah,
and I
no.
jumped in.
Well, no, I think we're basically done. So if anybody's watching this, please do fill out that survey that's listed in the chat section. And thank you to everybody who watched, and thank you to this whole team.
Thanks, you guys. Nice seeing you again.
Yeah.
See y'all too.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having me, Catastrophic.
Thanks, Beth.
Thanks,
Nice seeing you.
Beth.
Thanks, Beth.
Say hi to everybody, okay, Beth?
I will. I will.
All right. Bye-bye.
Ciao.